I would get people to focus on the real problem, which is habitat destruction.
Today I'm talking to the brilliant but elusive Edward Dee. I've been trying to get Eddie on the podcast since we launched in early April. Eddie is the plantsman at Burren Nature Sanctuary and founder of the National Collection of Burren Flora in our Burren Botany Bubble. Since starting the collection in 2012, Eddie has managed to display and propagate the stunning array of Burren Flora that grows on this special and fragile landscape. Each plant, whether it is a wild orchid or a tiny gentian, needs particular growing conditions: soil, precipitation, pH, sunlight or shade, and Eddie has managed to display them all happily together in the botanic collection, despite predictions from many sources that this was impossible. In 2018, funded by the Botanic Gardens Conservation International, Eddie and staff at Burren Nature Sanctuary visited the Jardí de Soller in Mallorca, home to the National Collection of Native Plants of the Balearic Islands. This collection is a fully functioning display, propagation, seed bank, and repopulation system. Plants are used to repopulate degraded areas. It is especially useful to Burren Nature Sanctuary as they share many soil conditions and a crossover of our Burren orchid species. Thanks to Magdalena Fornes and the staff in Soller for generously offering their expertise to help support our efforts. Since then, under Eddie's management, the collection at Burren Nature Sanctuary has partnered with the National Botanic Gardens in Glasnevin as a site for seed collecting for Ireland's new national native seed bank. And the first seeds delivered to the seed bank were from the bee orchid that grows in the Burren Botany Bubble. Eddie's expertise and commitment to the collection and nature in general is exemplary. He is multi-talented. He's also a silversmith and makes silver jewellery in the winter months and is the bass player in the band Awesome Adudu. Welcome, Eddie Dee. Hi, Eddie. Thank you so much for being on the show. I've been trying to get you to do this since April. You're the most difficult guest to get on the show, so thanks a million. Do you want to tell us where we're sitting today to do the interview?
Okay, we're sitting in the Burren Bubble, which is a collection of native Burren plants that we put together in 2014. We started. We have a wall garden outside with a similar collection. Mary's responsible for this amazing piece of architecture, and I have landscaped it and done the planting. I take care of the plants here.
Really good. And how did you become a nature lover? Do you want to tell us a little bit of the background?
I was very lucky insofar as I grew up in East Yorkshire on a farm beside the sea, and we didn't have a lot of contact with other kids, and we were left to our own devices to entertain ourselves. And I was always fascinated by newts, and we had a lovely pond on the farm, and you literally could just stick your net in there and pull out a newt, and we had buckets full of newts, poor things. And also butterflies. At that time there was a lot of butterflies around, and I used to collect butterflies and moths, and that's basically where it all started. I was quite young. I was probably 6 or 7 when I really started getting interested in things and looking at books. My parents were good. They bought me good nature books, encouraged me. My sister encouraged me. She was really into the wildflowers. The rest of the family, my brothers, were much younger than me, so I didn't really have much influence on them, but I was very lucky.
Lovely. Lovely. And when's the last time you saw a newt?
Actually, sad as it may seem, at my father's funeral, we were all back at the house, and I had bought a tree which I wanted to plant for my mother, who had died a year previous. And I went to get water, and there was very little water left in this barrel, and I tipped the barrel, and under the barrel was a great crested newt, which are actually quite rare at this point. When we were children, there was a lot of newts and there was a lot of great crested newts, but now they're actually quite rare. And there was this male great crested newt, beautiful thing, yellow belly, black, big newt, about 4 inches long.
Oh, that's really special. Really special. What kind of tree did you plant?
I planted a hawthorn tree. It's called Paul's Scarlet. It's a red cultivated variety. It has red flowers.
Oh, that's so lovely. And what do you have a favourite plant or animal? I know you have tons, but what's your favourite animal?
My favourite animal is undoubtedly badger. I think the badger's had a really tough time of it in the last 40 years, really. And in Ireland, it's still been persecuted every day. And I just find this horrendous. I find it horrendous that there are vaccines available for TB for badgers. They've been doing tests. They've run the show. They've areas where the badgers have been vaccinated. In Wales, for instance, in Northern Ireland, they've actually a small area in Wexford, I think, where they've actually been trying to get that program running. But it's mostly lip service, and they're really not towing the line. The problem is the farming industry is such a big lobby, and so the vets make an awful lot of money out of this game. Testing TB is bread and butter for most vets, I think, who are dealing with cattle. So that's not going to stop in a hurry. And also there's private enterprise killing badgers, basically, and they don't want to put themselves out of business either. So it's not going to stop in a hurry, really, this persecution.
So we need a voice for the badgers.
There is a voice for the badgers. There's lots of voices, but they're not getting heard. Usual story. The government pays lip service and talks about their environmental issues and things, but nothing changes.
Yeah, I got a really sad text from the Department of Agriculture the other day saying, protect yourself from wildlife. Contact us now if you have badger setts on your land. Now, luckily enough, I don't think I told you, Eddie, I did get a call from a local department vet saying that this area of South Galway is a vaccine trial area, and he wanted to know if we had any sets. But I had got the general text that went round to every farmer in the country, ring in so that we can dig out and kill your badgers. It was just, gave me shivers. It was just a shocking thing to receive. And the badgers, if they're vaccinated, and in the Burren, I think they've put up special watering things for the cattle, which are slightly raised up, and the TB isn't being transferred from the badgers. But why do you love badgers in particular?
They're fascinating creatures. Their whole lifestyle. The fact that the sets can be there for hundreds of years, and the runs that they make, generations of badgers have used the same runs. Also, they're very good at regulating their population. They're pretty organised. They're very clean creatures. They clean out their sets regularly, and they're just very entertaining things. When you see Attenborough did a really good DVD film documentary about badgers, and they were filming inside the set throughout the year, and just to see what's going on inside underground is quite fascinating. I just find them lovely things, and I think it's just terrible that they're being treated the way they are, and it's totally unnecessary. And never mind the history of badger baiting, which still goes on in this country behind closed doors. They just get a hard time.
Yeah, they're lovely creatures. And I mean, what do they eat? Especially at this time of year, what do you think they're out looking for?
The badgers mostly, their main diet is earthworms. That's what they'd go for before anything else. They eat fruit, they'd eat young birds if they could catch them, they'd eat anything basically. They're pretty omnivore really. But mostly earthworms is what they like. If they're really stuck, they'll eat slugs. They'll dig up wasps' nest even, and hedgehogs, unfortunately. And it's well known, and I've read a lot of papers that have been done in England about this, that wherever you get densely populated badger population, you're going to get no hedgehogs, because the badger seems to love hedgehog meat.
Right.
Apparently, if a fox attacks a hedgehog, you'll see that he'd leave most of it. Whereas if a badger attacks a hedgehog, he takes everything except the skin. That's all that's left. Everything else gets eaten.
Wow.
And they're very good at opening the hedgehog. They can prise it open. They've got very strong claws, sharp claws, and very sharp teeth. And the hedgehog stands no chance.
Yeah, they have a reputation for having a very strong bite and being quite vicious. That's only really if they're cornered, but they do have a very strong jaw.
Yeah, well, that's where the badger baiting has been such a big thing over the centuries, because they're such a powerful creature for their size, and they will fight their corner.
We got a call from our local vet one day saying that a badger had been found on the road. She'd been knocked down, and would we like to take her because she wouldn't be able to survive out in the wild. She was in somebody's kitchen, and she was a real pet. You could pet her, and she was very quiet and lovely, but she seemed there was something a little bit wrong with her, so would we take her on? So it took me a couple of days to work out if we could get a license, and I got back to the vet, and she said, oh, no, we had to let her go. She obviously got a bump on the head. She came back to her senses, and she was very cross. So she survived okay.
But people do take on cubs as pets, when their parents have been excavated during these eradication sessions, and they make very good pets, apparently. So,
they're lovely. They're lovely. Well, the next question is, do you feel spiritually connected to nature?
Oh, definitely. More and more as I get older. It's really my whole reason for being. I'm lucky to have a lovely place where I live. I've spent my whole life building it up to make it a wildlife habitat. And first thing I do when I get home is walk around the place, see what's happening. And we know, myself and my lady, Karen, where all the nests are in the spring. We're looking out for all the different birds. We spot all kinds of things, and we know where the little voles are making holes, and we look out for wood mice. We have a wildlife camera. And I'm just blessed, really, in that way.
And you have a badger set on your land and a little stream that runs through it.
The badger set was about 100 yards downstream, actually, from my land, by the border. And we used to put peanuts down, and they would come almost to the house. We'd catch them on the camera. And otters as well on the river. Surprisingly, at the same time as the badgers. And one day we heard a machine downriver, and I knew it was the badger set. And they dug them out. We heard a couple of shots, and that was the end of the badgers. So we've no badgers. But the good news is, where I live, there's a lot of ancient woodland pockets, just little islands, isolated oak wood, holly, hazel woodland. And the badgers were eradicated from there. But it's a high secret, and I shouldn't be really saying this, but they're actually coming back now. We've spotted activity there in the last 6 months.
Oh, that's great news. So what positive action could you suggest for people that would be easy for people to do to help nature or their local wildlife?
Join groups that are actually actively doing things. For instance, the Irish Wildlife Trust have branches all around the country, and they do all kinds of projects and try and encourage kids into their groups. And there's all kinds of things that people can do, and even in their own gardens to try and encourage wildlife and let places be wild. Certain little corners even where you can have a few nettles for your butterflies. And there's the peacock butterfly and the red admiral and the small tortoiseshell exclusively need nettles for their caterpillars to survive and come to fruition, become butterflies. So leave a little patch somewhere wild and encourage nettles. That's what I think.
Great advice. Do you have a suggestion for an inspiring nature book or one you'd like to recommend for people?
My sister was 70 recently, and I had a book that Karen bought me, my girlfriend, and it's called The Great British Year, and it's wildlife throughout the year, and it goes through every month and every season and all the things that are going on. And it's not over the top, but it's a big book. It's a coffee table book. It's got beautiful photographs and great information, but it's not overpowering for people that don't want to read too much about nature, but want to know and are interested. And it's just a really beautiful book. It's a BBC program that was on, I think, called The Great British Year, and that's the book. It's a thick book, and it's just full of beautiful photographs and information. Anyway,
that's a great suggestion. I haven't heard of that one, so that's another interesting one to look out for. Do you have any YouTube videos? I know you were talking about some people on YouTube that you'd like to tell people about.
I can't remember the name of this guy now. He's a Chinese guy. He's American Chinese, and he is going around advising people how to regreen the planet. And there are areas in Egypt that were complete desert, and these areas now are growing trees and plants, and the water's running again. And the same thing is happening all over the place. Wherever he goes, he leaves the track behind him that the water comes back. The water table comes back with the plants. And even in China, the Chinese are doing amazing work, transforming massive areas of degraded land back to green, productive land and trees and plants and water. Important, get the water table up, because the water table has been pushed down by deforestation mostly. And once the water goes and the trees have gone, that's the end of it, desert. So get the trees back, get the water up, and that's one of the main things I could think of.
Yeah, we'll find his name. I'll put it in the show notes. We'll get it afterwards.
The other thing I think people should know is that there's an awful lot of lies going on in the whole environmental movement, and it worries me. Even my hero, David Attenborough, has been guilty of perpetuating this problem. BBC, respectable as they're supposed to be, put out these beautiful films, but they tell people lies, and that just breaks my heart. That they have to use that. They have to use lies to try and get people on board, and it's not the way.
Can you give us an example of? I think one of them was it the polar bears?
The example is a polar bears, for instance. Like back in 1970, polar bears were almost extinct from overhunting. The population was down to 5,000, I think, polar bears in the whole of the Arctic. That was the survey done then. There's 35,000 polar bears now. So obviously the polar bears are doing quite well, and have been doing quite well, and they've been around a long, long time, and they've seen many changes in climate. And also, he was talking on this particular video about the walruses, and the walruses had no place to go, and they were all falling off the cliff, and they're all dying at the bottom of the cliff because they had no sea ice. It's absolute rubbish. There was a documentary made in the 70s, and it showed the very same thing. And the reason is that the walrus population goes up and down constantly, just like lemmings. They overpopulate themselves. They've got no place to go. Also, the polar bears are very clever, and they can push the walruses up the cliff to make them fall off the edge. And there they are waiting at the bottom of the cliff, so they have a big feast. So there's an awful lot of lies perpetuated by the BBC, and unfortunately David Attenborough is guilty of being involved, which is an awful shame.
Yeah, I suppose it's trying to shock people. I mean, we've all seen the picture of the audience when they're watching the terrible footage of the walruses. I mean, nobody wants to see that. It's horrific.
It is horrific.
But the reality of what's happening with nature is slightly different. The problems are different, but they might not be so dramatic for people to see. What do you think David Attenborough or BBC now should be talking about or should be filming?
Well, the first thing that should happen is the lies have to stop. The IPCC has to stop perpetuating this rubbish about global warming. I'm doing a lot of research in this field, and I have been doing it for a long time, because I was very worried about it when the whole thing came up 20 years ago. It started to be a big issue. And what I've discovered since, and I have people here in my pocket that will verify all this information. There's a Nobel laureate. His name is Freeman Dyson, and he will tell you that CO2 is one of the most important gases on this planet. There's also another guy, and his name is William Happer, and he will tell you the same thing. He will tell you that CO2, we were almost completely out of CO2. Most CO2 has been taken up with coal under the ground, limestone rocks, all the dolomite, all these things full of carbon. The carbon sink is massive on the planet. And going back 60 million years, when there was much more carbon around, there was a lot more plants. We got to a point where there are certain plants that have developed now in more recent times, and I'm not talking in the last 20 years, I'm talking like in the last thousands of years, few thousand years. They've developed, they're called, there's 3 and 4. The 3 plant, I can't remember, it's much more technical, but 3 plants are able to use carbon dioxide, but they need an awful lot of water to get the carbon dioxide out of the air. So they're depleting the ground of water. First thing, carbon dioxide, lack of carbon dioxide depletes the ground of water. Secondly, the other plants like that are well adapted to growing in dry conditions, like maize, it doesn't need the amount of water to get the carbon dioxide. It's adapted to the lack of carbon in the air. So what's happening now, with more carbon in the air from human activity, as we know. It's actually minuscule, really, in comparison to what the amount of carbon that's been produced by the oceans and everything else. Carbon dioxide, natural gas. This idea that it's a poison is just absolute rubbish, which really annoys me. They're making carbon dioxide out to be the evil gas that's killing us all. It's not at all. It's actually very beneficial to the human race and to the planet and to all plants. It's a well-known fact that if you grow lettuce in a huge greenhouse, you pump carbon dioxide in there. That makes your lettuce grow much faster. So this is the whole thing. We need carbon dioxide in the air for the plants. The planet is greening. From the satellite pictures, you can see the Sahara is getting greener. The planet is getting greener. It's actually percentage-wise, it's growing fast. There's more carbon in the air. There's more green areas. The deserts are greening from carbon dioxide.
So what's the global warming, or do you think there is a problem with global warming?
I don't think there's a problem with global warming. I have plenty of information which people can check out. There's a guy on a very simple level. If you go onto YouTube and look under philosophical investigations, 3 days ago, this guy put up a video which explains the last 10,000, 12,000 years since the Great Melt. He shows the level of carbon dioxide rising constantly since that time. The temperature's been going up and down like a yo-yo. There's been very warm periods where civilization thrived, where the Roman Empire grew, the Greeks, the Egyptians, all these people created huge empires during a warm period. After that, there was a cooling period. Devastation. Cold makes devastation. People eat each other in cold weather. The ice ages. Cold. Horrible. Nobody can live in cold. People live in warm. The temperature has been up and down constantly since the last big melt. And there's been some very cold periods. And the last one was the Little Ice Age, which was in the 1700s. And 1850 it finished. And during that period, it's well known that people were starving to death. So we don't want cold, we want a little bit warm. The temperature, as I said, is up and down. It's actually, when you look at the general graph, it's pretty constant. Global warming, in the sense that it's a big fear for human race, is absolute rubbish. And if people would only look at the science, the proper true science, they would find that out for themselves. There's other things going on behind the big global warming picture.
So what do you think about rising sea levels and things? Is that just a consequence of a natural
There's no
process?
rising sea level either. And I was looking last night even at a documentary, and it's called Arctic Sea Ice Change. And it's winter ice edge of the Arctic. And the record started in 1579. And the sea ice goes up and down as well. And mostly it's down to sunspots. The temperature in the Arctic comes from the bottom of the sea. It doesn't come from above, it doesn't come from the sun, it doesn't come from any global warming. It comes from the bottom of the sea. And it takes hundreds of years for that cycle, that cold water to move around the earth and to come up into the Arctic. There's time, back in the 30s, there was a channel through where people could get across. I can't remember the name of the channel now. They could take boats through that channel in the summer. That hasn't happened since. The ice edge is much the same as it was back in 1780. And the record is there. The guy, his name is Eric Solheim, which is Solheim. HEIM, and it's called Winter Ice Edge Records, and you'll see that on YouTube. What else is there about that?
Well, what do you think would be? Well, I suppose we could just slip in the last question, and it might get you back to what your train of thought.
Sorry.
If you had a magic wand, what one thing would you do for the planet today?
I would get people to focus on the real problem, which is habitat destruction policy. In Ireland here we see massive habitat destruction all around us. Farming policy run by Chagas, when on the other hand they're telling us, oh yeah, we've got this green agenda. Rubbish. They're destroying the place. They're ripping up the burren. There's wholesale planting of ryegrass. Farmers get paid by their acreage, and they make damn sure that there's no areas left with any hedges, briars. Any briars in the corner, they don't get paid for those, no. So people want to keep their land clear. There's no wildlife corridors. There's no food for wildlife. What we're left now is little islands, pockets of places where wildlife can survive, but they can't connect. What we need is wildlife corridors. Farmers need a policy. There needs to be a new policy for wildlife integrated into this green agenda, where farmers are paid to leave a corridor around their field so that the little islands where there are wildlife, i.e., like I was talking about the woodland where I live, there's a few pockets there. There's 3 pockets of native woodland. And I see there again, the river. They come along with a digger and they scrape all the sides of the river. Oh, we have to clean the river. We have to keep it clean. The water has to flow. Yeah, but what about the wildlife? What about the corridor of the river? That's gone. And it takes years to come back. What about the little creatures that are running up and down the riverbanks? They can't move to the next woodland. What about the birds? They don't like flying over open fields. They need the trees. They hop around from one bush to the next. They need food to get there, to get to the next island. So you end up with these little islands with creatures that are going to become extinct ultimately because they don't have the biodiversity needed to survive. So basically, there has to be new look, new approach if we're serious about wildlife protection and habitat destruction, and forget about global warming, because that is just a big diversion and it's taking away all this energy and all the people that are interested and could be doing things positively. It's taking their energy and sucking it away because they're all worried about global warming and dying from getting boiled to death. It's just unbelievable, actually.
Well, I think that's a really beautiful thing for the magic wand, the wildlife corridor. I saw a guy on Twitter, he's in England with a big farm, and he did a wildlife corridor throughout his large farm. And it would be so good if we could join all these wildlife corridors together.
Absolutely.
The Burren Nature Sanctuary is 50 acres of a sanctuary for animals and plants and everything. We are utterly surrounded by single sward ryegrass, foxes and badgers being poisoned and shot. It's a complete island. And if the animals manage to get to the next bit of cover, it would be very hard. But there's good news. We saw a buzzard here the other day, so buzzards are coming back. And there are what positive messages can we end on? What's a positive message for the nature in Ireland? Let's try and pick something. It's a hard one.
The positive thing is that there are people like Mary, and hopefully I like to think I'm included, and other people that I know, my neighbours, that care, and want to make little reserves for what wildlife we have. And hopefully those creatures that live in our reserves will be able to spread. And hopefully there'll be more enlightenment down the road, which has got to come. We can't have the darkness forever. Like I was listening to a guy on the radio, and he was talking about the curlew population. And we all know now that the curlew population is almost extinct in Ireland, whereas 20 years ago you could hear a curlew anywhere in the wetlands, inland, in the breeding season. There would be curlews all over the place. These days, very hard to find curlews. There are some people, there are some farmers that are changing their way of looking at life and looking at their way of farming, and are definitely more interested in preserving nature instead of destroying. So I think that movement's growing.
I think the first step is trying to connect people with nature. And I think one good thing out of the whole pandemic is that people have been forced to stay at home and just look at their local tree or whatever it is on their road. And, there's been quite a growth in interest in the local natural history. So that's one good thing about this whole lockdown situation.
Yeah, for sure. There seems to be people have got time to stop and look. Unfortunately, most people live in cities, but hopefully they'll get out and breathe some fresh air and touch the earth.
Well, that's a good place to stop, I think. Thank you very much, Eddie, because I know this is the last thing you wanted to do. So I really appreciate it, and lots of really interesting, some controversial issues there, and, really showing your great passion and love for wildlife and nature. And thank you so much for everything you've done here. Without you, we wouldn't have any of this collection.
Well, thank you, Mary. And I'm so happy to be working here for you. I love this place, and I hope to continue. I'm hoping to retire next year, but I'm hoping to continue working at the Burren Nature Sanctuary. And hopefully we can educate people and encourage people and make the world a better place.
Great, because we won't let you retire. So thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to this special episode of Nature Magic. To celebrate our 20th episode, eventually persuading Eddie to talk, and the launch of the print version of the Nature Magic book, available on Amazon, we are giving away 5 copies of Nature Magic, How You Can Engage Everyone with Biodiversity, to the first 5 people to give us an honest review of the Nature Magic podcast. It's easy. Scroll down on your phone to the bottom of the podcast to reviews. Click on the stars and take a screenshot. Email it in to us. The email address is in the show notes. Please subscribe and tell your friends. We have some more exciting guests lined up. Stay safe and remember our online shop for your Christmas shopping, where we have a lovely selection of Evoca rugs on sale, animal adoptions, our native tree planting project, and much more. Thank you for listening, and we hope you're inspired to take action for nature.